Latch the windows, lock the doors, and put the kids to bed. It's time for another episode of
Tales from the Garage.
Okay, I'm gonna try this again. The last two videos that I filmed, both of which were me doing random vinyl pulls, for some reason didn't come out. I could see they were recording while I was recording them, and as soon as I clicked the stop recording button, instead of the video popping up, as it normally does, in the little window, I got nothing. I got a blank Logitech screen, which basically tells me, hey, guess what? I didn't record what you just did. So I did one video that was 40 minutes. I did one that was over 30 minutes, and they didn't come out. I then did a couple test recordings, and all the test recordings came out, but they were shorter. I don't know what's going to happen. So here's my third try. And maybe I'll keep this one short, just so I'm not tempting fate. So we'll see. I'm going to do a random vinyl pull and talk about whatever it is I pull out. Let's see. Whatever this one is, it's got a really worn cover. This one corner. It's not an ECM, but it's an ECM artist. So does that count? I don't know. A little bit more tattered than, well, I still kept the shrink wrap on here. Here's a non-ECM Keith Jarrett, though it's all full of well-known ECM artists, Charlie Haden and Paul Motian, both of which passed away in recent years. So this is a trio album recorded in New York. I think this is fairly well known. This is actually on Atlantic. And it was recorded, there's no recording date on here, though the release date's 71. See, that's the one thing I like about ECM recordings. They always tell you the month and the year something was recorded. This does not. But I know it's early, so it's a trio album, which I thought, if I would have just looked at this, I would have thought this was one of his quartet albums with Dewey Redman. I can't comment on the music. It's been ages since I heard it. I think what I do recall, though, and kind of to be expected at the time, is that the recorded sound isn't that great, and it kind of hurts the music. I recall after I got a bunch of ECM recordings of Keith Jarrett's, that I decided, well, let me sample his work on the other labels he recorded for. And some of these coincided at the same time. He was recording in the 1970s for not just Atlantic, it was another label, Impulse, yeah, I'm pretty sure it was Impulse, as well as ECM. So it's not like these are all pre-ECM recordings necessarily. Yet you can really appreciate and get spoiled by the quality of the ECM engineering people, how well they record something. So I remember liking the music on it, but thinking this wasn't as well recorded as the ECM stuff, which kind of hurt it a little bit. So here's some fairly looking quite young. If you were aware of what these guys looked like as they got older, and in recent years, Charlie Haden looks really particularly young there, and Paul Motian, and Keith. I like the album cover of this. It's a cool album cover. So this, when I looked at it, I thought, oh, that's the quartet, but it's not. It's a trio. And mostly Keith Jarrett originals. And he actually does, oddly enough, a Joni Mitchell track on here, which I don't recall. Of course, it's probably more in a ballad mode, but it runs all of 2 minutes and 20 seconds. I don't think I was aware of that when I used to listen to this really so much. Charlie Haden, in addition to bass, plays steel drums on this, as does Paul Motian play steel drums as well, in addition to drum kit. And I guess Keith, because he doesn't have Dewey Redman on here, he also plays soprano saxophone on here. Steel drums. It must have been a whole bunch of steel drums in the studio for this one, because everybody was playing them. Conga drums, Keith Jarrett also plays, and soprano saxophone, steel drums, conga drums, and tenor recorder. The one thing I always liked, on the rare occasion you would hear it was pretty much in this period, of course in addition to acoustic piano, was I liked the flavor that Keith brought whenever he played the recorders on his albums. And I'm thinking of Survivor Suite on ECM, which is one of my top 5 Jarrett albums ever. It's a great album. And that has a recorder on it. And a couple albums from that early to mid-70s period that Keith was playing around with some alternate instruments, the OSI drums, which is more like a tuned percussion thing. So this is an album that I would love to hear again. I don't have in CD. I would love to get it in CD. I'll probably check out YouTube to hear it, to hear what it sounds like again. Or I will, actually. I don't know if it's up there. Recorded in New York City. Produced by George Avakian, who is a big jazz producer. Yeah, I remember buying that. It's another disco mat. Can you believe? Because this was an older album at the time I bought it. This came out in 71. I probably bought it in 1980 or so it's almost 10 years old. But can you imagine a new sealed album for $4.29? Incredible. All right. Pick another one. Now this is funny. This is one of the albums. This is one of the albums I picked out in one of my 2 videos that didn't post. So here I am talking about it again. Charlie Byrd, Sugarloaf Suite, which is not only a great cover but a great album. And I would say to anybody, Charlie Byrd recorded a lot of albums in his lifetime. This was one from his later period. This was recorded in concert at the Concord Jazz Festival, August 1979. So it is not not something from his early days. He's passed away now. But this is, and for a live recording, which is what I think is an outdoor festival, the sound is incredibly good. It's just an acoustic trio of Charlie Byrd on guitar, his brother Joe Byrd on upright bass, and Wayne Phillips on drums. Now, this was my first Charlie Byrd album, though I'd seen him on TV. And even though I do have other albums by him that I like very much, there's a lot of albums that I guess people nowadays wouldn't appreciate that he did so much because they had heavy arrangements on them. So they had strings and horn sections and things like that. And you could say, oh, it fall into elevator music territory. But I guess you could say they do. It would fit elevator music, but they're great stuff nonetheless. But I think a lot of people into jazz don't really have much of an appreciation for that stuff anymore. And this would be the way to go because you really get to hear him play. And he's a very subtle player, not a show off. Now he only plays nylon string, which is unusual in a jazz and improvising context. Now the funny thing is, buying this album very, very early into my jazz education, apart from The Girl from Ipanema, I hadn't heard any, knowingly anyway, I hadn't heard any Antonio Carlos Jobim tracks. Charlie Byrd is a lover, or was a lover, in a big way, of Antonio Carlos Jobim. So his music, if you're not familiar with him, very much that light Brazilian jazz thing with the nylon string guitar, follows very much in that mode. Except for Charlie, unlike Antonio Carlos Jobim, really didn't use vocals much on his albums. So he does 2 Antonio Carlos Jobim tracks on here, which were really the first time I heard Antonio Carlos Jobim, Favela and Triste. And there's 4 Charlie Byrd originals on here. But listening to them, they sound like they're Jobim tunes. I mean, that's how heavily he was influenced by him. I would always get them mixed up when listening to them. When those originals came up, that Charlie Byrd wrote 4 out of the 8 tracks, I would think, that's a Jobim tune there. Oh no, that's a Charlie Byrd original. Very subtle, and it's very hard to pull this off. You've got no other, backing guitars. This is live, obviously. You've got no piano. So Charlie Byrd is left to play the chords and the melody as well. And he does it in his beautiful, as well as improvise. And he does it in his beautiful, subtle way. To anybody that can appreciate quiet jazz, and this is, this is stuff you could say you could put on as background. It could be background music. It could be dinner party music. It could be the kind of thing that wouldn't offend people or jump out at people. I wouldn't quite say it was elevator music, but it's all on the mellower side. It doesn't really ever get beyond like a mid-tempo thing. But it's fantastic. He also does, this is one of the first or second versions I've heard of Luis Bonfa, another late Brazilian guitarist that apparently Charlie appreciated and worked very much in that same mode as Joe Beam and Charlie Byrd. Luis Bonfa's probably his best-known track called The Gentle Rain, which was a movie, late 60s movie, starring Christopher George and Linda Day George. And after I got this album, a year or two later, I remember The Gentle Rain, the movie, coming on TV, and I watched it simply because I knew the track. And it turns out that I believe Luis Bonfa wrote the Gentle Rain track for the movie. So I basically watched one of the first movies I ever watched just to hear the soundtrack. It was kind of a drama, kind of a drama love story thing. Very kind of obscure, odd, not a successful movie in terms of like box office, but an interesting one. I'd definitely watch it again. But it's got, a lot of late 60s vibe to it, no doubt about it. It's a beautiful track, The Gentle Rain. It's, in its original version, very similar to this, done more of a ballad. But George Benson actually did it on one of his early jazz albums, right around 71, I want to say. I think it's called Beyond the Blue Horizon, which was one of George's more jam, straight-ahead jazz with just organ and bass-oriented albums, organ, bass, drums. And he did The Gentle Rain more of a jamming tune, a little bit, quite a bit more up-tempo than the other versions I've heard of it. It's a great tune with a great little melody. So this I highly recommend. This is one of those that I really sought out on CD when it came out because it's even though it's live and there's a little bit of audience noise in between tracks, for the most part it's pretty quiet with the just upright bass, very soft drums, and the nylon string guitar. So it's something you really want to hear in a kind of quiet media like CDs. And again, Concord Records is funny about the stuff it lets go out of print, and I could be wrong. I can't remember what CD version I have of this. It might be out of print now. And I know Concord Records has also been doing some funny things with CD reissues of older albums. Sometimes they slap two together, so you have two discs of previously released earlier albums in a package, but instead of naming the package after the two individual albums that are in there, they give it a completely different name. So if you're looking for a specific album, which happened to me with the Kenny Burrell album, it didn't come up as being available when in fact it's part of this 2-disc set that was given a completely different name. So Concord's really screwy. It's really hard to sometimes follow their stuff and find their stuff. But I love this album. I love this album. This has got to be in my top 100 albums ever. And just as a side note, actually how I discovered Charlie Byrd was I was watching public broadcast they did this 1-hour edited live concert by the Great Guitars, which was a guitar trio with a rhythm section of bass and drums. And the original guys in the group were Charlie Byrd, Herb Ellis, and Barney Kessel. Now, at the time that I caught those guys on TV, it was probably 78 or 79, and I was not familiar with any of the three of them. And say Barney Kessel and Herb Ellis both on electric guitar, and Charlie Byrd on nylon string. And right after I saw that on TV, I went out and I bought solo albums by all three. I didn't want to get a group album because I wanted to hear each guy do his thing separately as leader, to just hear their exact styles without the combo being together. So right after seeing that, I remember going out and I bought a Charlie Byrd album. I bought a Herb Ellis live album, which was recorded, I believe, at the same time in '79. Herb Ellis at Montreux, it was called. And that one has not still come out on CD. and a Barney Kessel album from a different period, I think from the earlier 70s. So I went out and I bought albums by all three of the great guitarists, but individual solo albums, so I could hear what each guy played like. And you know, I was not disappointed by any of those. All three albums are really great. Back to the stack. Can I possibly not pull out an ECM? And the answer is no. Here's a great Jack DeJohnette's New Directions, one of his several groups. He had Directions, and then he formed New Directions, and he had Special Edition, and all of the groups pretty much changed members, except for the Directions was one band, New Directions was another. Now, New Directions only made this one studio album and a live album, so their personnel didn't change, not under the name of New Directions. But sadly, two of the guys are not with us anymore. This was a fairly early buy, $5.49, believe it or not, for a new LP. Bought this at Discomat. Fairly early in my ECM life. It was a fairly new record at the time. I probably bought it in 79, maybe late 79. It was recorded in June 78. So I didn't quite get it as a new release, I'm sure. Another eye-opening album, though. I was already familiar. By the time I got this, I had a couple things by Jack and a couple things by John Abercrombie. So and this is prime John Abercrombie and Jack DeJohnette period, really. But especially in terms of John's playing concept, because to me he reached his height right at this period when he played electric guitar and some acoustic guitar, and he had his electric mandolin. The electric mandolin is very prevalent on here. So it's Abercrombie on guitar and the electric mandolin, Eddie Gomez on upright bass, the great Lester Bowie on trumpet, Lester Bowie from the Art Ensemble of Chicago, there he is at the end, and Jack on drums and piano. So there's, I think there's only piano on one track. There's two tracks which are basically group improvisations, Dreamstalker and One-Handed Woman, pretty much group improvisations. And Silver Hollow, which is one of my top three favorite, a beautiful ballad. My top 3 or 4 favorite Jack DeJohnette tracks ever is on here. Silver Hollow, which is a track he's recorded a few times, including, I don't know if it ever came out on record. It was on a video of him performing Silver Hollow just on solo piano. And I believe that's the only track that he plays piano on here. But it's a beautiful track. And John Abercrombie went and recorded an album with Bobby Hutcherson shortly after this period, right around this period. I think it was 79. And apparently Bobby Hutcherson needed some material, or maybe he had heard this album, because Bobby Hutcherson actually, on his album Un Poco Loco, with John Abercrombie on it, recorded another version of Silver Hollow, which is very different. It's almost a smooth, slicker jazz version of it. And there's only 5 tracks on here, so they stretch out with a lot of improvisation. And this is just one of those. This probably would make it in my top 5 DeJohnette, and that's a tough area to get into. It is a wonderful period for Jack and John Abercrombie and all these guys. Lester Bowie, the Art Ensemble of Chicago with its original members was still going strong at this time. Wow, this is a great album. Now this, I'm not sure if this is currently available on CD, but it was available on CD, and I rushed right out to buy it. I'm going to keep this one short today only because I'm not sure if it's recording, or if it's going to come out. Actually, I know it's recording, so I'll see what happens when I hit the save button, and if this comes out, I'll probably do maybe another short one. Maybe I'll do something different for the next video and just reminisce and not pull albums. I'm going to do some CD pulls. And I also figured out I could do some cassette things too. I only kept a very small part of my cassette collection, but it's all in one bin, with the exception of a few loose cassettes. And I thought one day I'll just bring the bin and just randomly pull out cassettes. I won't be able to talk a lot about them because I haven't played any of them for years. And they're mostly classical things that I bought at bookstores, budget things. But they'd be interesting just to see what I saved, because I pretty much tossed all the rock stuff out. So I'm going to do those, and I'll find a way to do some CD random pulls. But I decided to wait until wintertime, because I can't be out here. There's no temperature control here. I can't be out here in the wintertime. And because the vinyl is out here, and the vinyl shelf, I can't do random vinyl pulls in the wintertime. So maybe I'll just hold off and save those cassettes and the CD pulls for when I can't be out here anymore. Even though I've got a few months to go. It's we're just about getting into August now. Okay, keep your fingers crossed that this saves. Hope everybody's doing well. Hit the bell on my subscription. If you've subscribed to my channel and you're just not kind of randomly watching this, make sure you hit the bell to get the notifications. I know myself, I've forgotten to do that on many people's that I subscribe to, and I wonder why I don't get notification, or why. Even the ones I do, though, it's a bit funny. I don't know if it's the fault of my email provider, which it may be, or whether it's a delay in YouTube. Because sometimes I'll get the notification. I get a lot of emails, so sometimes I miss them. But a lot of times I'll get the notification of somebody posting up a video, and I'll get it hours, if not a day or two after they put up the video, the email notification. And a lot of times I'm in there and I just happen to notice while I'm on YouTube that they've got a new video posted up, and I catch it totally by accident, not through the email notification. So I don't know if it's the AOL provider that I use with their slow delivery of the email, or whether it's YouTube being very slow to send out notifications. I'm not sure how that, what side that's coming from. Okay, keeping my fingers crossed that this posts, that it creates the video, and I will be back soon, guys. Hope everybody's doing well. Take care.
Tune in next time for more
Tales from the Garage.